The night I saved the garage, I almost didn't stop. I'm going to tell you about a Friday night where I was so bone tired I could barely see straight. And a split-second decision I nearly didn't make, one that ended up saving literally everything I had. My name is Henry Cole. I'm 29. I live in a cramped apartment above a strip of old shops on the edge of Pittsburgh. Everything I own either has rust on it or debt attached to it. My car has cleared 200,000 miles. My garage, Cole Auto Repair, is held together by a second-hand lift, a bank loan, and stubbornness. But it's mine. Every bolt in that place I earned. I started turning wrenches at 18. No degree, no connections, just the ability to hear an engine the way some people hear music and know exactly what note is wrong. 3 months before that Friday, a company called Harrington Properties bought the entire block my garage sits on. They wanted it cleared for a retail center, coffee shops, a gym. Everything my customers were not. I was the only tenant who hadn't signed out. My lease still had over a year left, so they couldn't just bulldoze me. Instead, their lawyers sent paperwork claiming I violated noise ordinances and dragged down property values, all of it fabricated. Now they were suing me in civil court, trying to break the lease early and stick me with their legal fees. If I lost Monday's hearing, I lost the garage. If I lost the garage, I lost everything. Rehook 90 seconds in. Here's what nobody tells you about fighting someone with money. You don't just fight them in court. You fight them while also working 2 jobs so you can afford to fight them at all. That Friday, I'd already done 8 hours in the garage. Then 6 more waiting tables at a diner by the highway. Lawyers aren't cheap, even when an old friend is charging you almost nothing, by 10 p.m. I was driving home on the service road near Route 51, wipers on full blast, eyes half shut from exhaustion. All I wanted was a hot shower and maybe 4 hours of sleep before I had to go through the case files one more time. Then I saw them. A black Mercedes half pulled onto the shoulder, hazard lights barely cutting through the downpour. 2 young women, maybe 19, maybe 20, stood drenched beside it. One of them was waving at every passing car. Every car kept going. I almost did too. I was exhausted. I had court in 3 days. I genuinely did not have the bandwidth to be anyone's hero that night. But something about the way they were just standing there, not panicking, just enduring, made me hit the brakes. I pulled in behind them, left my engine running, and walked into the rain. It soaked through my work shirt in about 4 seconds. Car trouble, the one closest to me turned. Dark blonde hair stuck flat to her face, mascara running in dark lines. It just died. We've been here almost an hour. Our phones are dead. Nobody stopped. The other one clutched her bag against her chest the way you do when that's the only dry thing left. I walked to the front of the car and lifted the hood. Took about 60 seconds to spot it. Battery terminals eaten through with corrosion, connections loose, and the rain had finished the job. Not complicated, but also not something you fix on the shoulder of a highway at night without a jump pack and dry hands. This isn't going anywhere tonight, I told them. You need a tow or roadside assistance. They looked at each other. We could call our dad, but the other one gave a small, exhausted laugh that didn't reach her eyes. He's busy. He's always busy. I knew that tone, not complaining, just someone who had stopped expecting something different a long time ago. There's a motel about 15 minutes from here. I can drive you. They stared at me like they were deciding whether I was real. You'd actually do that, I shrugged. I'm not leaving you standing here in this. Rehook, 3 minutes in, they got in my car, and that's when they said something that at the time meant nothing to me. They introduced themselves in my Honda, which, compared to their Mercedes, probably looked like something I'd dragged out of a field. Sophie up front. Maya in the back, surrounded by my toolbox and a stack of old invoices. They didn't say a word about it. Sophie asked what I did. Mechanic, small garage. Maya leaned forward. So you knew what was wrong with our car immediately. Battery and terminals. Not hard to fix, just bad timing with the rain. We drove in silence for a while. Then Sophie asked about the second job, and something about the dark and the rain, and the way they weren't looking at me like I was beneath them, made it easier to just be honest. I told them about Harrington Properties, about the lawsuit, about Monday. Sophie turned in her seat to face me. But if your lease isn't expired, how can they actually do this? Better lawyers. More money, that's usually how it works. Maya's voice went quiet. That's not fair. Fair costs money, I said. People like me usually can't afford it. None of us spoke for a while after that. Then Sophie said, almost like she was thinking out loud, "Our dad works in law too." "Lawyer?" I asked. "No," Maya answered from the back. "He's a judge." I didn't think much of it. "There are a lot of judges in Pennsylvania." I said something like, "Tell him what you saw tonight." People in positions of power should hear how regular people get ground down. Sophie looked out at the rain-streaked window. "He hears everyone except his own daughters." They said it without bitterness, just the quiet resignation of two people who'd made peace with a fact they hadn't chosen. We reached the motel. I pulled under the awning so they wouldn't get any wetter. Before they stepped out, Sophie looked at me and said, "Henry, you seem like a genuinely good person." I gave a tired smile. "I just didn't want two people to freeze out there." Maya shook her head gently. "Good people always say it like it's nothing." "That's how you can tell." Sophie had been charging her phone off a battery pack in her bag. She asked for my number in case they needed the car sorted in the morning. I handed her one of my slightly bent business cards. She read it out loud. "Henry Cole, I hope Monday goes okay." "Me too," I said. They disappeared through the glass lobby doors. I pulled back onto the road, shirt soaked, hands cold on the wheel, completely unaware that stopping for two strangers had just set something in motion that I couldn't have scripted if I'd tried. For the first time in months, though, I didn't feel completely alone in it. Rehook tilde 6 minutes in Monday arrived before I was ready. Allegheny County Courthouse, Old Wood. Old paper, old nerves. I sat at the defendant's table in the only white dress shirt I owned that didn't have grease stains, wearing a tie borrowed from my neighbor. My hands were clasped under the table so no one could see them shaking. My lawyer, Mr. Clark, sat beside me flipping through the file one last time. His office was small, his hair was gray. He looked as tired as I felt, but he believed me, and at that point, that mattered more than anything else. Across the aisle, Grant Harrington sat in a gray suit that probably cost more than my rent. His lawyer, Davidson, had a smile so thin it could cut glass. Grant didn't look at me once. To him, I wasn't a person. I was a line item on a demolition plan. Mr. Clark leaned over. "We have the lease, we have payment records. We have photos of the garage in good condition. Their evidence is thin, but their team is not. Stay calm, tell the truth." I nodded. My mouth was completely dry. "All rise." I stood. The door opened. Judge Whitmore walked in. Late 50s, silver hair, serious face. I had never seen this man in my life. But I recognized him in about 2 seconds. The shape of his eyes, the slight tilt of his head when he glanced down at the papers. The same features I had seen 3 nights ago, soaking wet, standing beside a broken-down Mercedes. Judge Benjamin Whitmore was Sophie and Maya's father. My stomach dropped through the floor. He took his seat, opened the file, and scanned the first page. His eyes landed on my name, Henry Cole. For half a second, just a flicker, something crossed his face. Then it was gone. Replaced by the same professional stillness he probably put on every morning with his robe. He looked up. We made eye contact. He knew I could see it. The recognition moved between us without a single word. My heart was hammering so hard I was certain the court reporter could hear it. Rehook minutes in what happened next I did not see coming. "Before we begin," Judge Whitmore said, "the court will take a 15-minute recess." A ripple of confusion moved through the room. Davidson shot to his feet. "Your Honor, is there a problem?" "Nothing that requires argument at this moment. Court is in recess." 10 minutes later, the bailiff appeared at our table. "Mr. Cole, the judge would like to see you in chambers." "Mr. Clark, you're to accompany him." Davidson immediately objected to ex parte communication. The bailiff cut him off. Mr. Clark would be present. "Everything on the record, if necessary." We walked through a side door and down a short hallway into a room lined with dark wood and legal volumes floor to ceiling. Judge Whitmore stood at the window with his hands behind his back, looking out at the city. He didn't turn around right away. "Sit down, Mr. Cole. Mr. Clark, you as well." We sat. He turned. His face was serious, not cold. 3 nights ago, my daughters called me from a motel off Route 51. Their car had broken down in the rain. They had been standing on the shoulder for nearly an hour. No one stopped. He looked directly at me. "Until you did," I swallowed. "Your Honor, I had no idea they were your daughters." "I know," he said. "That's exactly why this matters." He walked to his desk and sat down. "Sophie and Maya told me everything, that you had worked 2 jobs that day, that you were exhausted, that you still stopped. That you didn't ask for anything in return, that you treated them like people, not an inconvenience." I looked down at my hands. "Anyone would have done that." Judge Whitmore shook his head slowly. "Most people drove past. You didn't." Mr. Clark was staring at me now, finally putting the whole picture together. Judge Whitmore continued, "This creates an ethical obligation I have to address. If I continue presiding, the plaintiff could argue bias. I've considered recusing myself." My chest tightened, but before making that decision, I reviewed the entire file. And what I found suggests something more troubling than a lease dispute. He opened a separate folder. Harrington Properties claims your garage violated cleanliness and noise standards. Several of the photographs they submitted don't match your location. One of them shows an entirely different building, with a blue sign your garage does not have. Mr. Clark sat up straight. They also claim you were 3 months behind on rent. Your bank statements show 3 separate transfers made on the correct dates. The management company appears to have deliberately misrecorded them. I turned to Mr. Clark. He looked stunned and furious at the same time. "Most significantly," Judge Whitmore said, "I had my clerk pull every case involving Harrington Properties over the last 2 years. This is the 6th time they have used nearly identical allegations to push small tenants out before their leases expired. 4 of those tenants couldn't afford to fight and simply left. One went bankrupt." The room felt several degrees colder. I wasn't the first. Judge Whitmore looked at me steadily. "Mr. Cole, I will not rule in your favor because you helped my daughters. That would be wrong, and I wouldn't insult either of us that way. But I also cannot pretend this is an ordinary commercial dispute when the record suggests a pattern of weaponizing the legal system against people who lack the resources to push back." I managed to speak, my voice rough. "So what happens now?" He stood. "I'm going back into that courtroom. I'm going to ask the plaintiff to explain the photographs, the payment discrepancies, and the pattern of similar lawsuits. If they cannot provide satisfactory answers, their case is going to have very serious problems." He paused. "My daughters also told me what you said in the car that night, that sometimes people in positions of power need to hear how ordinary people get ground down." He looked out the window again. "I've presided over thousands of cases across more than 20 years. I've always believed I was fair. But being fair in a courtroom is not the same as listening to the people behind those cases." He turned back. "You reminded me of that, not with a speech." With one decent act in the rain, I didn't have words. Mr. Clark put a hand on my shoulder and said quietly, "Just breathe." Judge Whitmore moved toward the door. "Let's finish this the right way. Rehook, 13 minutes in what happened next in that courtroom. I want you to really picture this." Grant Harrington was already seated when we walked back in, arms crossed, looking like a man who had never once lost anything and didn't intend to start today. Davidson stood beside him like he'd been coiled and was ready to strike. Judge Whitmore entered, gave nothing away. "Court is back in session." Davidson rose immediately. Voice smooth, confident, practiced. "Your Honor, the plaintiff will demonstrate that Cole Auto Repair has repeatedly violated the terms of the lease through excessive noise, improper waste disposal, and repeated late payments." Judge Whitmore raised one hand. "Before you continue, the court has questions regarding the evidence submitted." Davidson paused. The first small crack. Judge Whitmore held up the photographs. "These were submitted as images of Cole Auto Repair. Can you confirm the date they were taken, who took them, and verify the location metadata? They were provided by Harrington Properties' property management team." "That is not what I asked." The temperature in the room dropped. "Can you confirm the date, the photographer, and the exact location?" Davidson glanced at Grant Harrington. "We can supplement the record at a later stage, so at this moment the answer is no." Davidson's jaw tightened. "Not at this moment, Your Honor." Judge Whitmore lifted one photo. "This image shows a blue sign in the upper left corner. According to the defendant's evidence, Cole Auto Repair does not have that sign. How do you explain that?" Mr. Clark rose. "Your Honor, we have also raised that question." Noted. Grant Harrington was beginning to look very uncomfortable. Judge Whitmore moved to the payment records. "The plaintiff alleges Mr. Cole was 3 months delinquent on rent. The defendant's bank records show 3 separate transfers made on the precise due dates. Why does the plaintiff's record show these payments as absent?" Davidson hesitated. "There may have been an accounting error." "An accounting error," Judge Whitmore repeated slowly. "One that led to a lawsuit seeking lease termination and damages against a working-class small business owner." Silence. Mr. Harrington. "Would you like to address this yourself?" Grant stood and adjusted his jacket. Your Honor, with respect, this property is undergoing significant redevelopment, Mr. Cole's business no longer aligns with the commercial vision for the area. We are simply protecting the value of our investment. Judge Whitmore studied him for a long moment. So the real issue is not lease violations. The real issue is that Mr. Cole does not fit your development plan. Davidson cut in fast. That is not what my client meant, but Grant had already said it, out loud, in a court of record. Judge Whitmore opened another file. The court also notes that Harrington Properties has filed 6 substantially similar actions against small tenants over the past 2 years, using nearly identical allegations. 4 of those tenants vacated before trial, 1 declared bankruptcy. Can you explain that pattern? Davidson straightened. Objection. Those cases are not relevant to this proceeding. They become relevant, Judge Whitmore replied, when they suggest a systematic practice of using unsubstantiated claims to pressure small tenants out before their leases expire. The room was completely still. For the first time since this entire nightmare began, the people sitting across from me no longer looked like they owned the room. Mr. Clark rose, his voice stronger than I had ever heard it. Your Honor, my client has never refused to cooperate. He has simply asked that Harrington Properties honor the lease they signed, or compensate him according to its terms. Instead, the plaintiff has submitted unverifiable photographs, misrecorded payments, and falsely characterized a compliant tenant as negligent in order to avoid their own contractual obligations. Judge Whitmore turned back to Davidson. Does the plaintiff have any independent evidence, a single verified piece of evidence, that Cole Auto Repair created an environmental hazard, exceeded noise limits, or committed a material breach of this lease? Several seconds of silence. We would need additional time to develop. No. Judge Whitmore's voice was flat and final. The plaintiff has had sufficient time. You brought this man to court and threatened his entire livelihood. You do not get more time now. Grant Harrington had gone pale. The plaintiff's request to terminate the lease is denied. The allegations of breach are not supported by admissible or credible evidence. The plaintiff shall reimburse the defendant for all reasonable legal costs. Furthermore, this matter is referred to the district attorney's office for review regarding possible abuse of process and submission of misleading evidence. Davidson shot to his feet. Your Honor, Judge Whitmore gave him a look that could stop traffic. I suggest you sit down before I order further inquiry right here. Davidson sat. The gavel came down. Case dismissed. I stayed in my chair for a long moment. Sound felt distant. I heard Mr. Clark saying my name. I heard Grant Harrington mutter something sharp under his breath to his lawyer. I heard papers shuffling, but the only thought running through my head, clear and solid, was, I still have the garage. I didn't lose everything. Mr. Clark shook my hand with a smile I'd never seen on him before. You won, Henry. I actually won. Not only that, they're going to be investigated. I looked toward the bench. Judge Whitmore had already left the courtroom. I wanted to say something. Thank you, anything, but maybe some debts don't need to be spoken in front of an audience. He had done what he believed was right. That was its own kind of integrity. Outside, sunlight hit the courthouse steps. I stood there breathing air that didn't smell like tension and old wood. 3 nights ago, I had stopped in the rain because I couldn't bring myself to leave 2 strangers on the side of the road. That decision hadn't bought me this victory. But it had made one man look at my case more carefully than he might have otherwise, and when he looked, he saw what Harrington had tried to bury. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. Mr. Cole, a girl's voice. It's Sophie. I stopped walking. My dad just texted us. He said the hearing ended. Are you okay? I looked up at the clear sky above the courthouse. I still have the garage. On the other end, Sophie let out a sound that was somewhere between a shout and a laugh. Maya's voice came through in the background. I told you. Good people don't lose forever. I laughed. A real one. The first real one I'd had in months. Rehook minutes in, but here's the part of this story that surprised me most. It wasn't the courtroom. It was what came after. Sophie called back a few minutes later. Her father wanted to invite me to dinner that weekend, not as a judge, just as a father whose daughters owed someone for being decent in the rain. They also wanted to bring the Mercedes to my garage. Sophie said after everything that had happened, she didn't trust anyone else to touch it. I told her I was free after 5 on Saturday. Saturday evening, I drove my battered Honda up into a neighborhood I had no business being in, gated streets, trimmed lawns, houses with actual square footage. I checked my shirt twice in the rearview mirror. It was clean. It still looked exactly like what it was, something a mechanic wears on his day off. When I got to the door, Sophie opened it before I could knock. "You came." Maya appeared behind her. "Come in." Dad's in the kitchen attempting to cook and we're attempting to prevent a fire. Inside, the house was larger than my garage and apartment put together. High ceilings, dark wood. Everything in its place, but it felt quieter than you'd expect for a house that size, like it had been furnished more for appearance than for living. Judge Whitmore came out of the kitchen in jeans and a gray sweater, holding a dish towel. Without the robe, he looked less like someone who decided people's fates and more like a man who wasn't entirely certain how his own oven worked. "Henry," he extended his hand. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for the invitation." He held my gaze for a second. "No, thank you for that night." Before I could respond, Maya cut in. "Okay, you two can have the emotional moment later. What do you want to drink?" Dinner was nothing like I'd imagined. No staff, no formal table. Sophie and Maya set the plates themselves. Judge Whitmore made pasta that was slightly overcooked. While everyone was still moving around the kitchen, I noticed a cabinet door hanging crooked on its hinge. I asked for a screwdriver, found one in a drawer, and fixed it before we sat down. When I turned around, all three of them were staring at me. "Maya, you came over for dinner and you're already fixing things. Occupational hazard," Sophie laughed. "Dad, keep him." This house has about 47 things that need attention. During the meal, the twins talked openly about the night their car broke down, how they'd argued with their father earlier at a charity event because he'd left midway to take a work call, how they'd driven home angry, how the car died in the rain and their phones died right after, how they'd tried to reach him but the call never connected. Judge Whitmore listened to all of it without interrupting, without offering justifications, without checking his phone. He just listened. After dinner, while Sophie and Maya cleared the table, he nodded toward the back door. "Walk with me for a minute." We stepped onto a wide patio overlooking the city. Light scattered below like gold thread. He stood at the railing with his hands in his pockets and was quiet for a while. "I've presided over thousands of cases," he finally said. "I always believed I was fair, but being fair in a courtroom doesn't mean I was fair at home." He paused. "Sophie and Maya have been telling me for years I was never really present. I used to dismiss it. I thought children from comfortable lives complained because they didn't understand sacrifice." He glanced over. "Then I heard that a stranger who was already running on empty still stopped for them in a rainstorm, didn't ask for anything, just helped, and I couldn't sleep. I watched the lights below. He said you had nothing to gain. You had your own problems bearing down on you, and you still stopped. Meanwhile, their own father spent years not stopping enough. You can still start," I said. He gave a small, tired smile. "I'm a judge. I know lost time doesn't come back." "No," I said, "but the time that's left does." He was quiet for a long time after that. "I understand now why my daughters spoke so highly of you after just one night." I felt my face go warm. "I just fix cars and pour coffee." "No," he said, shaking his head. "You're the kind of person this world needs more of. Someone who still stops, even when they're sinking themselves." 3 months after the hearing, the sign above Cole Auto Repair still hung slightly crooked on one side. I liked it that way. Harrington Properties was under formal investigation. Several former tenants who'd been forced out the same way. I almost was started connecting with lawyers. A local paper ran a piece on the pattern of lawsuits. Grant Harrington stopped driving past my garage with that look on his face. I still opened at 7 a.m. I still ate lunch standing next to the toolbox. I picked up the occasional evening shift at the diner to knock down the debt faster, but it wasn't pure survival anymore. There was breathing room now. Customers came in steadily. Some had heard about the case. Most came because Sophie and Maya had apparently told everyone they knew to bring their cars to me. The Mercedes was the first one I worked on after everything settled. New battery, clean terminals, full electrical check. When I handed Sophie the bill, she frowned. "You charged too little." "I charged what it's worth." Maya shook her head. "You're absolutely terrible at using connections." "I know how to fix cars," I said. That's enough. Saturday nights at the Whitmore house slowly became a regular thing. At first I felt out of place. After a while, it was just part of the week. I fixed a leaking faucet in their kitchen, rehung a laundry room door, changed the spark plugs in Maya's car. In return, they gave me a seat at the table without making me perform for it. Judge Whitmore was changing too, in the ways that actually matter. Home for dinner twice a week, phone in a drawer during meals. Asking Sophie and Maya questions about their lives that had nothing to do with grades or achievements. One evening, after the girls had gone upstairs, he followed me out to my car. He said it was making a strange sound. I popped the hood and checked the serpentine belt while he stood beside me. Have you thought about expanding? He asked. I think about it. The money doesn't think the same way. He was quiet for a moment. Then, there's a small business support program through the city. It's not a personal favor. It has nothing to do with our case. They have funds specifically for independent repair shops displaced or threatened by redevelopment. You'd qualify. I looked up from the engine. You don't have to do that. I know, but I can give you the information. What you do with it is entirely up to you. He handed me a business card. You know, Henry, I spent a long time believing that justice only existed inside a courtroom. Maybe part of it is also making sure that people like you don't get erased from a map just because they can't afford expensive lawyers. I closed the hood. Justice sounds better when it doesn't arrive too late. He nodded. It does. 6 months after the hearing, I received a modest grant from that program. It wasn't enough to reinvent anything. It was enough to replace 2 machines that had been held together with willpower, repaint the sign, and hire a 20-year-old named Lewis, who'd been turned away from every other shop in the area because he had no prior experience. I saw myself in him, so I gave him a chance. A year after the night it rained, Sophie and Maya had a small birthday dinner at a quiet restaurant. They invited me, Lewis, their father, and a few close friends. Halfway through, Sophie stood up with a glass of water. A year ago, she said, looking at me, Maya and I were standing on the side of a highway in a storm, starting to accept that nobody was going to stop for us. She paused. Then Henry stopped. And after that, everything changed. The car got fixed. Our dad started getting fixed. From his seat, Judge Whitmore sighed. Sophie, everyone laughed. She kept going anyway. And maybe we got a little fixed too. Maya looked across the table at me. Thank you for not driving past. I held my glass and tried to think of something that didn't sound like a greeting card. In the end, I just said the simplest, truest thing I had. I'm glad I stopped. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I stood alone in front of the garage under the new sign. Cole Auto Repair, honest work, fair price. I thought about that Friday night, how wrecked I had been. How close I came to just keeping my foot on the gas and letting 2 strangers disappear in my rearview mirror. If I had, everything would look different right now. I would have lost the garage. Sophie and Maya would still be waiting for a father who showed up. Judge Whitmore would still be perfectly fair in court and completely absent at home. And I would still be getting slowly crushed by people with better lawyers and no conscience. One small choice didn't fix the whole world, but it opened a door, and behind that door was everything. My phone buzzed, a message from Maya. Movie night this Saturday. Dad promised he won't check his email. You have to come as a witness. I smiled and typed back. I'll be there. I put the phone in my pocket and walked to my car. When I drove past the stretch of road where I first met them in the rain, I didn't feel the weight of that storm anymore. I just remembered one thing. There are nights when you feel completely empty, when you think you have nothing left to give anyone. But if you still stop, if you still choose to do the right thing when no one is watching, and there is nothing in it for you, that single moment might be the thing that saves the rest of your life. And you won't know it until you're standing on the other side of it, looking back. So stop. Stop for the stranger in the rain. Stop when you're tired. Stop when it costs you something. Because the world runs on those moments, and right now, it needs more people willing to make them.